Welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be going over the CP system. I'm not going over every detail of the CP system. I'm just going over certain parts of the CP system so people have a greater understanding of it with the changes from Morrowind. And, of course, we got one change with Horns of the Reach, which changed one thing. But I still haven't been over the system in a while, and I kind of want to go over what jump points are, what breaking points are, and then go over a few other little details in here, kind of explaining ways that you can utilize the CP system to benefit your character, even when you're going through that process of hitting CP all the way through to max CP. So let's go ahead and talk about the CP system by explaining how the CP system works. So the CP system is actually a passive system, kind of like skill passives, but it's more of a passive system that gives you boosts to different things. It can even apply different effects because of the different things. Each constellation that you see here has 4 stars that you can put your champion points into, and then it has 4 stars that you unlock with champion points. Each of those stars that unlock at 10, 30, 75, and 120 points in its respective tree. That does not mean you have to put 100 points or 120 points into one star, because you can't. You can only put 100 points into each star. Each of the 3 groups of constellations, so the warrior, the thief, and the mage, also grants you bonus attributes. So the warrior grants you bonus health, the thief grants you bonus stamina, and the mage grants you bonus magicka. Now, these can only be increased by, or will only give you an increase of 20% in your attributes if you have 100 points in the respective trees. So if I have 100 points into any of these 3 constellations, it doesn't matter how they're placed, as long as it adds up to 100, I will get 20% health. Same thing with this, I'll get 20% stamina, and the same thing with this, I will get 20% magicka. But you can only have each of them maxed when you have 300 CP altogether. That means a total of 300 CP. I am almost at cap, so I am well over that. So I can actually reach that 20% pretty quick. And all CP is carried across the account. So any CP you earn on one character unlocks on all characters. So even if they're level 1, you can go ahead and dump your CP right into your characters right when you make them and be overpowered for most of the content, because it will make you overpowered. So that's kind of the cool thing about CP. There's also different things within the CP that boost your characters. The warrior tree is mostly about damage mitigation stuff. There is some things in here that don't relate to damage mitigation, just like the tower has a lot to do with like resource recovery, and then reduce cost in active abilities. And these are abilities that are not on your character's toolbar. These are active abilities that you activate by using the mouse or doing different things like that. For example, to break free is to hold block and tap attack. That will make you break free. It also bashes. Sprinting is another active ability that your character can do. Siphoner isn't an active ability. It's just a thing that it gives you passively to your character that allows them to help reduce a person's recovery rate. So it has to do with recovery, as you can see. Then you have all 4 of these, which all have to do with recovery. Over here, again, reduce things in passive or active abilities, like blocking, tumbling, reducing the healing effect of enemies through certain skills. So this one does affect a skill, but not by a great degree, but it also reduces healing, so it's something that deals with reduction or recovery rate kind of thing. And then of course the shade, which is in reducing that. So moving over here, we have the Mage's Tree, which is literally all about damage except for 2 abilities. One is a non-damage ability, and one or passive, and one is an ability or a passive that allows you to do damage against shields. The one for healing is called Blessed. That is a really kind of a non-combat thing, but it is a combat thing because you heal in combat. But it does no damage. And then Shattering Blows doesn't improve your damage against a target at all, just their damage shield. So those are the only ones in here that don't affect damage. The rest of the stuff in here is mostly damage related. Now each of these trees have their respective CP or their respected percentage bonuses in their CP point allocation. So if you go into some of them that have ones that are give you percentage values, and then one that gives you a flat number value. For example, medium armor focus is a flat number value bonus. Spell shield is a flat number value bonus. Resistance is a flat number value bonus. This is a percentage bonus. So that's what I mean by the different things, like each CP has its corresponding thing. Now, the ones that give you a flat number bonus, most of them go up to 5,100 and I think it's 5,160, but we will go ahead and see. Okay, 5,280, and then there is only one that is a flat number that goes up to 1,680, and that is resistance. All the other ones like this that are a flat number all go up to 5,280 though, or 5,250. Either one, it goes up to that amount, and that's it. And there's actually 6 that are flat value besides resistance, which would make 7. So there is actually 7 of them, but 6 that go up to the 5,250, and then one that goes, or 280, and then one that goes up 1,650. So that's it. With the percentages though, they have different percentage caps, and those percentage caps are 15%, 25%, and 35%. The easiest way to find out how much of a percentage cap they have is just by going in here and putting 75 points into them, or 70 points. You'll see this one says 22%. That means it caps at 70 or at 25. If you go over to this one over here, physical weapon expert, and you put into here and you put in 70 points, you're going to see that it gets a greater number above 30, which means it is 35. And then of course if you do the same thing with Mighty, which is a 15% increase, you'll see that it only goes up to 13%. And that's how those different things work and in the system. So you have 15%, 25%, and 35% caps on certain one of these things. And because of that, they have what's called jump points. Now, a jump point is, let's say you want 10% in Mighty, and you take it up to the 43 mark, which is 10%. But you want to take it up 1%. Now, going up 1% in here is going to take a certain amount of CP, or champion points. And when you do this increase, so it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to take 5 points. Those 5 points are the jump points necessary to get that 1%. And that's what jump points mean. Now, I mentioned something earlier called a breaking point. A breaking point is where your CP, the percentage value CP, reach a point to where they get hit by the greatest amount of diminished returns. That means they can only go to a certain point before they get hit by a heavy amount of diminished returns. And actually, I was just at this one's breaking point, which is 43. Any 15% increase one is a 43-point breaking point. That means anything above that is going to cost you more champion points to get the last remaining 5%. And that's where a breaking point is. Now, you could say breaking points are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, increments, but in reality, they only have one. And that's because of the way the CP point does diminished returns. In this one's case, it's 43 points. After this point, it gets hit by heavy diminished returns to get 5% extra. So, I mean, going from 10 to 15 takes 56 points. Going from 10% to 15%. So to gain 5%, it takes 56 points in total. And here's the thing that's good about it, is you can take that 56 points and put it into a 25% bonus and get 20% out of it. And that's its breaking point. And then you think, okay, well, 56 points, that's a lot. But that leaves me 43 points to put into something else, which you could put into anything, technically. But my whole point here is that with the breaking points, you don't want any negative you want to get the most out of your character as possible. So going to these breaking points first, and then looking at your remaining points you have left. Like for me, if I were to do this as a DPS, now, because I know the point system so well when it comes to DPS, I can set my points in here, and you can see if I have the 1 point extra, I'm going to have 9 points left. But I basically gave myself a 10% increase in physical, poison, and disease damage, a 20% increase in critical strike damage and critical healing, and a 20% increase in damage over time. But not only that, but I increased all direct damage I do by 20%. Now I have 9 points, I will have 9 points left. So if I were to take 9 points, I'm going to take one out of here because I'm not going to mess with this. But I'm going to take these ones, these 20% ones. And let's say I want to boost one up with 9 points. Well, here's what's going to happen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So with 9 points, or 8 points, I'm going to go here. 9 points, I'm going to get 2% extra. That means I'm going to increase my damage by 2%. Now, I'm going to say something here that might tweak some nerves, but I'm not doing it intentionally. I'm not doing it to tweak anybody's nerves. This is why you don't want to do this. That's 2% you're going to increase that damage by, right? That's only 2%. This doesn't include all that other stuff. Because, see, the thing about direct damage is direct damage not only does it stack with Mighty, but it also stacks with Precise Strikes. Thaumaturge not only stacks with Mighty, but it also stacks with Precise Strikes. So whatever bonus you get from Thaumaturge, you also get an extra bonus from Mighty. So if I take this up 2%, I'm only going to get a 2% increase in my damage with damage over time. But if I take that 9 points and I go over here and say, you know what, I want to increase my staff or my physical weapon damage, and I take that 9 points and put it in there, I'm going to get 6% increased damage from my light and heavy attacks. That means my light and heavy attacks are going to be increased by 6%. Now you take that 6%, it stacks with direct damage, it stacks with Mighty, and it stacks with precise strikes, because it gets increased across the board. So I get 6, 20, that's 26, that's 36% increase in my light and heavy attack damage, versus a 2% increase in just my damage over time. So with this setup, I actually get more damage out of my character because I get greater effect out of it than doing that. Because you got to think, if you're doing a light weave attack on a rotation, and you do that light weave attack, that light weave now just gained damage. A small damage increase to some, but when you take all the things into account, you gain a greater damage increase with your light weaves because they get all those bonuses with them. Not only that, but if the enemy is off balance and you get Exploiter, you're going to get another 10% increase in your damage against it. So that is, now you're not just getting that 30% or 36%, you are getting 46% damage increase. Then on top of that, you're getting the 20% from this. Now there is other things you can do with that 9 points. For example, let's say you want to use the Shadow Mundus Stone, but you're like, oh, well, it only gets 9%. Well, you can go into here, and you can go like this. And you can put 1% in here. Now you have 30% increase in critical strike damage because of the Shadow Mundus Stone. Oh, well, that's okay, but you know what? I would really like to get more out of it, kind of thing. Well, that's as good as you're going to get right now, because we're limited to only having 9 points beyond this point. And that's why you see a lot of people doing this right now with their CP, because they think it's going to benefit them more. Now remember, I just took out 20% damage in damage over time. And this is what a lot of people are doing right now. Is it 67? Or is it 69? It might be 66 points. I think it's doing 66. And they're doing like this. So they got 57 in here, they got this here and this here. Now look at that. That's only 2%, guys. 2%. 2%. That's right here. You're only getting an extra 4% damage. But if you were to put all of it in here, that 56 points, like I showed you, now you get 20% more damage from all direct damage plus this. And it gives you greater damage potential with your character overall. Now you could go, oh, well, I'm just going to dump the rest into here, increasing all this damage. But even this isn't going to give you enough, because that's only 5% more damage on top of this. So you're getting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% damage increase. This was a 20% damage increase from all damage, except for damage over time. So as long as you do the initial hit, like a lightning staff's heavy attack, the initial hit from a lightning staff's heavy attack is direct damage. Anything beyond that is damage over time. But it isn't calculated by a lot of different things in here. So having the greater knowledge of how to place your points is a good thing. And that's that. So those things, that's why it's really important to know the jump points and to know the breaking points, because going above those breaking points right now with the game's design doesn't help. It's only 1% when you can get a percentage out of something else a lot easier. Like even going over here into the mage's side and doing the same thing. See, I can do this on the mage's side too, and give yourself this, because the mage is going to be very similar, and you have 64 points. Now a lot of people want to hit that 75 here so they can get exploiter, but that's only 10%. That is literally going to be 10%. And having that 10%, don't get me wrong, it's a good idea, but getting 10% or 20% from this, 20% from this, and 20% from this, and 20%, or 10% and 20%, and leaving you with 9 points, getting that 10%, you can get that 10% from right here for now until the next update, and in the next update, you can put 10 points into here, and the next day, after that, before the next chapter, you can put another 10 points into here, which will unlock exploiter. Then you can always have this set to 1 point lower, because sending 75 into there, just so you guys can see, gives you a 23.4% increase. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, it's not bad. 3% is really nice, but if you don't have something there to compensate for it, it's really not that great. The only one who benefits from Thaumaturge at 75 anyways is the DK, because of damage. Most of their damage is damage over time through fire. The Sork gets damage over time, but you got to remember, the Sork also gets a 5% increase in shock damage. And with that 5% increase in shock damage, they can actually make that shock damage, take their shock damage up to a higher value because of this. If you're playing a Dark Elf, for example, see, we took that 9 points and we put it in here. But if you're playing a Dark Elf gets a 2% increase in their damage over time. Now, you won't be able to do it this update, but unless you take out of something. And if you take out of something, that means you're going to lose something. So the best thing to do would be to do this. And the reason I say this is because you want to stay within a flat value range. 15% is a flat value range. Even though it's 5%, it's a flat value range because that's 5%. If you take it up 1 more percent and you use the Mundus Stone, Shadow Mundus Stone, that's going to take you up to 25% increase in critical strike damage. If you have the, if you're using Trap Beast, if you put in here up to 17%, this is going to give you with Trap Beast, or sorry, go up to 18%. Sorry, my math is a little wonky. 18%, you're actually going to get a 30% increase or a 25% increase in your damage. But see how it leaves you those 17 points? This is what you can do with 17 points. So you can actually put into here, and I don't have the 9 points, so you would actually be sitting at this range, 12.57, which isn't really that bad, but that's why I always suggest people to go to 15 here, because they're going to get 15%, but they're also going to get a 20% increase in shock damage if they're a dark elf with 3%, and 1% in here is going to make them, with a high elf, have a 20% increase in shock damage. Because a high elf gets 4% shock bonus, they get a 4% flame bonus, so you'll be at a 15% flame damage, 4% shock damage, or 15% shock damage, and then you add the 5% shock from the sword, and it goes up to 20% increase in that damage. So that's 20% plus 20%, that's 40% damage. Right there. Just from that. And then you add this to it, and that means your critical damage is being increased by 15%. Now, this is why it's good to stay at these levels, but to only use these values to compensate for their lack of. Now you can take that 19 points if you wanted to, and you could put it in here and give yourself 12% increase in your light attack weaves or your heavy attack weaves. So that's not only 12, that's 12. Now you got to remember, if you're using a lightning staff, that's 12% damage increase, 20% damage increase, 20% damage increase. That's a 52% damage increase from your heavy attacks on the lightning staff. So there's a lot of things you can do with this system that allows you to really complement your character. The same thing with this over here. You can do a lot of things over here to complement your character. If you're wearing light armor, putting this up to 10% gives you, an extra 10% recovery. So it's a 30%. I think it's 30% recovery rate. The same thing with Mooncalf on a stamina wearer. You get a 30% stamina recovery. But in heavy armor, you only get to wear one piece of each. And you only need about a 10% recovery. So you don't need as much in these as a tank. Because a tank gets a 4%. So technically, you only need 6% in here, which is 23 points. On these two. That's if you're going for a one-piece light, one-piece medium. In 5 pieces heavy armor. Because you get 4% from it. So that puts you at a 10% recovery rate. Anything past that, if you take it up to 10%, you would have to literally take it up to 11% to get a 15% recovery rate. So it's really good to know what you're trying to get out of your character for these percentages for that value. But what about like reducing the sprint cost, the bashing cost, the block cost, the tumbling costs, all that kind of stuff? Those are all going to be beneficial to you as a character, or for your character, because of the simple fact that you get the greater amount out of it. You get greater effect from it. So when you put into these points, into these different systems, you don't want to go like, oh, I'm just going to dump 100 points in Tenaxy, 100 in Arcanist and call it good, because these things are also beneficial to you. Blocking, reducing the cost of block saves you stamina. What does that allow you to do if you're a magic person? Well, you block an attack with the staff, you might have enough stamina to dodge roll out of that area of effect, or to dodge roll that attack. Well, I can't do that because I don't have anything in tumbling. Now you can put points in tumbling and get greater benefits from them. Now these are all 15% increases, so their breaking point is 43. And if you fill in all 4 of these at 43, you're still going to have points left over. If you just fill in 1 to 43, this up to 43, because you're going to want this at 43. You're going to want that 10. Because that's 10% added to 30% no matter what. That's going to give you a 40% return on all magicka, stamina, magic or stamina, depending on the weapon. If you're using Destro or Resto Staff, you're going to get magicka back. If you're using any other weapon besides that, you're going to get stamina back, and it's going to be 40%. That means you're going to get a 40% return, unless you're using a Resto Staff, which gets another 30% added on top of that. So they don't get 40%, they get 70% of their resources back. Now, that is not multiplicative, that is additive. That means it is an additive bonus, no matter what. So you're getting an extra 70% back with the resto staff and light armor. In destruction staff, you are getting 40% back. In medium armor, you're going to get 40% back with all weapon types. Unless you're wearing heavy armor, then you're going to get 25% back on top of that. So it'll put 65% in your pocket. Or back in your resources. So it's kind of a nice thing. It's a good way to keep your recovery rate and all that kind of stuff managed. These are really good too for recovery rates, but when you, like I said, when you're playing a tank, it's really hard to you know, determine where you want it. I actually went and tried 15% in here on my Stamina Templar. I took this up to 11, making it 15% total, and because of that, I noticed that I get a greater capability of watching my stamina resources when I'm in dungeons and stuff. So I might even take this up to 15% in the next update. But the rest of these things are like that. Now we're going to get into the armor section and the damage reduction section, because this one is one that a lot of people... I'm not going to talk about the upper stars. That's up to you. Like, any of these are going to be... they're just beneficial. They're not like they're necessary. The only one that's necessary is this one for tanking. The rest of them aren't really necessary. They unlock, you get them, cool, I got a bonus. That's the way I look at it. Some are good to have, some are not so good to have, some are just there. But this one is definitely one that you want for a tank, especially with this new change. And this is the one that got changed in this update, Horns of the Reach. It's while you have a shield or frost staff equipped, your spell and physical resistance is increased by 1500. Now what that means is, unless it's defending on the frost staff, you will only get 1500 resistance. If you have a defending frost staff, you will get 2750 plus 1500 in both resistances. With a shield, you only get 1900 and something, I think it is, or 1700, possibly 1900, maybe. Not sure, I'd have to look. I don't have a shield on this character, but it's like 17 or 1900, somewhere in there. Resistances. Base, like that's the minimum that you get, or whatever you get for divines, and that's at gold quality, and then you take it that 1500 and add it to it. Now if it's a reinforced shield or a Nirnhorn shield, you will have a greater resistance value, and that 1500 even makes a better look there, because that 1500 will actually make up for using a one-handed sword with a different trait on it. So it's kind of a nice balance there. So the thing about resistances and damage reduction and how they fit into the game, look, I'm not going to go over the math. I'm just going to tell you guys this much. Your resistances right now in the game, if you look at how resistance values work, like I can actually go out and show you guys this. I'm not afraid to show you. So we can go in here and go calculator. And the way your resistances work, let's say you have a Sork running 12,000 spell resistance. Well, you divide this by 660. And this is what you get. You get an 18% damage mitigation. That's it for 12,000. Now you got to think about that. An enemy hits you for 10k. You're only reducing the damage by 18,000 or by 18%. 10k by 18%? Yeah, that's not even a sneeze on that damage. You're still going to be taking a lot more. Okay, so how do we improve our damage mitigation? By damage reduction, and that or increasing your resistance values. This is why it's really important to know how you have things set up. So it's really important to know how to set up these things in here, and that's why going with the jump point system instead of following what a lot of people do. And I'm nothing against those people. They do this because they don't nobody does the math on the damage being done to you. Everyone does the math of damage being done against enemies, because that's simple. Doing damage to being done on you is a lot harder, because you have to take every type of damage and every type of hit being put on you into account. So that's why it's really good to know what the values are in the game. Now the one thing that's awkward here is, because you have to put into these two to 43 to get 10% out of them. I'm just taking them up to their breaking points, by the way. I want you guys to see how this works. So we're going to put into everything that you get bonus-wise over on the other side and increasing your damage, all but critical resistance. We're going to give you everything else. So this is an optimal setup for a DPS, or anyone actually, because you're not going to be focusing on, most of the time, a lot of people don't focus on spell shield, medium armor focus, light armor focus, or heavy armor focus because they're not necessary to a lot of people. But here's what happens. When you focus so much on the damage reduction side, you actually, it's not as good of a benefit as focusing on the armor side. The resistance side is always going to give you more protection than damage reduction. So just letting you guys know, having good armor values with a good damage reduction is really, really good to have. But how do you do that? Well, it would require you to run a damage shield. That's why the Warden is actually starting to come out on top of the main healer for most groups right now, is because they can apply spell and physical resistance to the group by 5,000, and that means nobody in the group has to carry that skill, except for maybe the tank, because the healer's not going to have time to keep that up all the time along with healing, unless they do some kind of a thing where they start timing it. But if they did, and they kept that applied to the group, that 5,280 extra resistances, you add that into that 12,000, and it goes to 17,000. And so we'll go back out here. We're going to do the calculator again. Now you take that 12,000, you add 5,000. We're just going to do 5,000 to it. So we say 17K, and you divide it by 660. And now you block 25% of the damage up front. So if you do that, just that's 25% of the damage being mitigated from yourself. But what if you could do this? Now, I'm just speaking hypothetically, just hear me out. What if you had a 15K spell resistance, and then you boost it up with 5K, and you take it to 20K? Oops. 20K, not 200,000. And then divide that by 660. That's a 30% damage reduction, or mitigation. So you mitigate 30% of the damage coming in. Now you take into account these other bonuses. Oh, 20% on top of that? Oh, I'll take that. Why? Because that's like 50% damage mitigated. What about this? Well, wait. This and this, they stack together. So that's 30% damage mitigated. This would be 30% damage mitigated. But if you add this to it, now you're looking at this. Most enemies in the game, most enemies, in fact, I will even say this, 100% of all enemies in the game do light and heavy attacks. In fact, they do a majority of light and heavy attacks over anything else. That means NPCs, all of them. You take a Naga, it's going to do light and heavy attacks. You take a cat, it's like a tiger or something, it's going to do light and heavy attacks. You take an Atlet, it's going to do light and heavy attacks. You take this world boss, it's going to do light and heavy attacks. In fact, it's going to do more of those than its own abilities. So you reduce that damage by 10, and it's direct damage, so that's 30. That's 40% damage mitigated. On top of that 30% that I just showed you. So that's 60% of the damage gone. Well, what if you block? Well, now that's another 10% on top of it. Because the way I was told that how the damage calculations work was it's basically they all get added together. Which, if that was the case, we would see a lot greater damage mitigation in the game than what we do. How it works is when you block an attack, you block a certain percentage of the damage first. Then your damage mitigation kicks in and it reduces it by the rest. And that damage mitigation can be the armor value or the damage reduction. If you have 10k armor value, just to let you guys know, that's a 15% damage mitigation. Then you add this on top of it. And you got to think, people are running around with like 2% more, 2% here, 2% there, blah, blah, blah. And they think that it's going to benefit them doing that. What would be more beneficial to you is to set these ones at these levels and put those 5 points you have or 6 points you have like this. For a mage, you know, but that's only 312. Yeah, 312 added to your character might take you over 1 point extra in damage mitigation, just from 312. Heck, even this could take you over 1 point extra. The point is that you have 3 points. Spend them wisely. So I'd have actually 312 there. But that's the whole concern here, is you want to be able to mitigate as much damage as you can. The higher your resistance values, the more damage you mitigate. The more damage you mitigate, the longer survival time you have in dungeons and trials. That means the less you're relying on somebody else, or the less you're relying on dodge rolling and blocking, the more uptime you have of your abilities, kind of thing. That's all it allows you to do. It allows you greater survivability. And that is how the CP system is designed to work. Now, you got to also remember here, guys, you can also get extra damage mitigation from other areas of the game. You can get extra damage reduction from different things in the game. There's buffs that give you damage reductions. There's the circular protection from the Fighter's Guild that gives increased damage reduction. And even though these things cost points to use, they're very helpful when trying to mitigate a lot of damage. Now, another way that you can mitigate damage, and this is what a lot of people do right now, the reason why they don't go for heavy resistances and everything, they go for heavy reduction, is because the more reduction they have, they can make up the damage that they take with healing. And that's why healers right now are set to the way they are, is because they want them to hit hard with their heals, or hit high with their heals, like really high values with their heals. And the only way you can truly do that is if you make a crit healer, kind of thing. And if you make a crit healer, your crit heals are going to hit even bigger, and you're going to be able to heal through all the damage your party's pretty much taking. And that's how we did it in World of Warcraft, was we had healers that were set up so with such high healing factor that they could literally mitigate like 100% of the damage that you would take. And you didn't even have to cast a bubble, nothing. You just stood there through the whole fight and got hit by everything. And it didn't matter because the healer would heal through it all. There was only a few mechanics where we had to get out of the way of the thing because it was like a one-shot mechanic. And that's because our healers had absurd healing in that game. And this game shares the same functionality, it just uses it in a different manner, but nobody really plays by that standard, and that's the truth. Nobody really plays by that standard. Everyone has their own unique way of playing the game and choosing how to play the game. I'm just showing you guys why this system is designed the way it is to give you the greater benefit to your character, so you have things like greater survivability. You get your health increased by 20%. That's a huge increase. That's like life changing. You get 20% added to your stamina, that's life-changing. You get 20% added to your magicka, that can be life-changing to your character. But you get all these other bonuses with it, all this survivability from this, with the health and the increase in resistances and increase in damage reduction. You get this with all the recovery stuff to keep better resource management, resource control over your character, so you're not wasting resources on blocking, dodge rolling, tumbling, breaking free. You're actually reducing the cost of those values. Then you go over here and you look at this, and you do the same thing. You look at these values and you go, man, I can do this, and I can get away with so much more because I can do it with this game. It allows me to minimax my character efficiently. And you guys got to think, in 5 more updates or 4 more updates from this, from right now, Horns of the Reach, we got Clockwork City coming. That's going to give us another 30 points to the total champion points, so 10 per tree. And then the next update is going to be a free update. That's going to come out in between that and the next chapter, which this next chapter is coming out in the beginning of the summer. So somewhere in there, we're going to get another update, which is going to be a free update. It's going to give us another 30 CP, which means we're going to get 60 CP. Another one after that is going to be 90 CP, and then 120 CP. So in a year's time from this date, right now, from today, we should have a total of 40 more CP. Now think about that, 40 CP. Now you guys remember where I was showing you guys this right here? These two? 40 CP. Now add 9 points to it. That's what you look like next year. That's 25% increase in damage from light and heavy attacks versus 2, 2, 2. Unless you take that 40 points you get and you dump it in here, and at 56 points, you're still going to be some points shy from reaching that 100, which is only going to give you a 3% increase, or a 5% increase. This is going to give you a 25% increase, and it works both ways here. Now, other things, it's a little different. Like, if I was going to do the whole resistance thing, or this stuff, I would actually just dump into my resistances. 40 points in the light armor focus, or 20 points in light armor focus, and spell shield, and then you'd add the 3 to it. Oops, that wasn't 3 points. That was. You're talking about 2,149 extra physical and spell resistance added to your character. That equates to almost 4%, or over 4% damage mitigation. Almost 4% damage mitigation right there. So it's kind of nice to know that, hey, I almost have 4% damage mitigation, because 6, 12, 9, 18, 24. So I'm almost at 24. That's fine. I would much rather be closer to 4%, get a 3% increase in my damage reduction, than getting a 3% from this or this or this. This is a 3% across the board on any kind of damage. I would much rather take 3% like that than 3% the other way around. And that's why it's really important to know the game's mechanics and to know its features. And that is what the champion points do for you. Now, the champion points do more than that for you, because you do get these little bonuses up here, and some of them can be really good, some can be really bad, some can be really horrible, but any of them are really good in the long run, because in the long run, any of these things are going to help boost your character to be more effective at whatever it is you're trying to do. Because even these tiny little bonuses, like reducing the damage you take by resurrecting a player by 15%, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different factors in here you should know. Because of these little bonuses, you can actually make up some pretty big differences in different things. And that's why it's really important to know the design. And that is it for that. I'm going to go ahead and put my points back. So, for the next update, just letting you know, before Clockwork City comes out, if we get any other changes to the CP system, I will go over and cover those CP changes. But until we get a complete overhaul of the CP, that's how it works, and that's its design. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you guys want to see more videos by me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later. Bye.